Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Malice in the Mitten. I am Tracy Preston.
And I'm Christine Malice. Before we begin, a content warning. Today's episode discusses domestic conflict, disappearance, murder, strangulation, and the recovery of human remains. Please take care while listening.
This episode is based on publicly available court proceedings, law enforcement information, news reporting, interviews, and other documented resources. Where allegations, theories, or disputed claims are discussed, we identify them as such. Any person discussed in connection with alleged criminal conduct is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in a court of law. Our purpose is to present this case accurately, responsibly, and with respect for everyone affected. Every case we bring you is carefully researched and presented with respect for the victims, their families, and the communities left behind. The show is not about sensationalizing tragedy. It is about remembering the people at the center of these stories. Because every victim mattered, every family deserves dignity, and sometimes the first sign that something terrible has happened is remarkably ordinary. A missed phone call, a car sitting in the driveway, plans that suddenly aren't kept, or a daughter showing up on a Sunday morning expecting to have breakfast with her mom. On April 25th, 2021, spring had returned to the farmland of Lenawee County, Michigan. Fields were waking up, planting season was beginning, and Raquel Bach made the short drive from her home to the place where she had grown up, her mother's farm. Raquel lived close, roughly half a mile away, close enough that Sunday breakfast with her mom wasn't an event that needed much planning. It was simply something they did. But that morning, Dee wasn't there. Her name was Dee Warner. She was 52 years old, a mother, a grandmother, a wife, and a businesswoman whose life was deeply rooted in rural Lenawee County. Friends and family described Dee as outgoing, energetic, and driven. She liked to dress up. She liked to go out. She liked to dance. And according to the people who knew her, Dee wasn't someone who disappeared quietly into the background. She worked hard. She could be tough. She could be generous. And she had built a life in which family and business were intertwined almost everywhere she looked. Together, Dee and her husband, Dale Warner, operated 3 primary businesses from their rural property. There was a farming operation, a chemical business that sold fertilizer and seed, and a trucking company employing roughly 15 people. The trucking company was particularly Dee's domain. Her son, Zach, handled bookkeeping, and Dee essentially ran the office operations across the businesses. She was accustomed to phones ringing, employees needing answers, schedules changing, problems requiring solutions, people needing to reach her, and Dee herself was almost always reachable. Which is why what happened that Sunday morning immediately felt wrong. Raquel called her mother. No answer. She texted. Nothing. That wasn't Dee. According to Raquel, her mother was so attached to her phone that if Raquel didn't answer a message within a few minutes, Dee would message again. Hello? But now Raquel was the one trying to get an answer, and there wasn't one. Then she started looking around. One of Dee's vehicles, a Hummer, was at the farm office. Her Cadillac was in the garage. and Dee wasn't answering her phone. But the vehicle she would normally use to leave hadn't left with her.
Yeah, at this point, both of her cars are there. So wouldn't that immediately raise the question? If both vehicles are still there, how was she supposed to have left?
Right, 1 + 1 are not adding up, but at that moment, nobody had an answer. Raquel went down the road to the home of Dee's brother, Greg Hardy, and his wife, Shelley. The message was simple. They couldn't find Dee. Greg called his sister. Then he texted her. Nothing. So Raquel and Shelley began looking. They drove around searching for her. Then they returned to Dee's house. Inside, there were things they couldn't immediately explain, like blankets were lying on the couch. Tissues were scattered around. Upstairs, they noticed some of Dee's personal items were missing, like her makeup bag, her curling iron. And later, the family would learn that her phone and passport were also gone. Those things could suggest that Dee had left, but everything else about the situation suggested something wasn't right. And then there was Dee's youngest daughter. Dee had 4 adult children from her first marriage. She and Dale also had a daughter together, Lena. She was 9 years old in April of 2021. The night before Dee disappeared, Lena had stayed with a cousin. And by Sunday, her mother still hadn't come to get her.
Okay, so that's a really big deal. If Lena normally went everywhere with Dee, would Dee really leave without making sure someone knew what was happening with her 9-year-old daughter? And who's Dale? Where's Dale? And he's the father. Is he still in the picture? How come she didn't give him any details about, hey, the kid's over here, pick her up there if she was going to go somewhere? You know what I mean? None of this is adding up.
Right. And that question would become enormously important. Because to Dee's family, leaving Lena behind simply did not fit the woman they knew. Because according to Raquel, Lena went nearly everywhere with Dee. They were extremely close. Leaving her daughter behind without calling, without explaining, without coming back, that didn't make any sense. Neither did disappearing for an entire day without anyone knowing where she was. Raquel would later be asked whether she could remember another day when nobody knew where her mother was. And she couldn't. But there was something else the family knew. The previous day had been difficult, Saturday, April 24th. Dee had been dealing with a conflict involving 2 employees from the trucking business. The situation had upset her. One employee, Stephanie Volkel, exchanged messages with Dee that afternoon. Stephanie sent another message at 7:43 that evening. She asked Dee how she was doing. Dee never answered. It would be the last time Stephanie ever heard from her. At first, even the people closest to Dee didn't know what to think. Shelley Hardy wondered whether Dee had become so overwhelmed that she might have hurt herself. It was frightening. But at that point, they just didn't know. They were simply trying to find her. Meanwhile, one of Dee's sons, Zach Bach, came to the property. There were security cameras at the farm office. Maybe they could answer the question everyone was now asking. Had Dee walked over there? Had she gotten into another vehicle? Had someone picked her up? So Zach reviewed the footage. He couldn't find her. He didn't see Dee walking to the office. He didn't see her driving away. There was no simple answer waiting on the camera.
So now all of our vehicles are still on the property. There's no response on her phone, no sign of her on the cameras, and her daughter's still waiting for her. At what point does this stop looking like someone who simply just took off to get some space?
Right, for Dee's children, that point came very quickly. They were no longer simply waiting for their mother to come home. They were becoming afraid that she couldn't. By late Sunday, Dee's children all came together, and they called the Lenawee County Sheriff's Office. And as a result, a deputy was sent to speak with Dale Warner. Dale told the deputy he had last seen his wife at home that morning. According to him, Dee had been sleeping on the couch when he got up at around 6 o'clock in the morning to begin working. He said he also later texted her, and she didn't answer, but he assumed she was still asleep. Dale told the deputy he wasn't especially concerned. He had noticed that Dee's hair curler, hair dryer, and makeup bag were gone. He also said Dee sometimes left when she was upset and suggested she might have another phone. His expectation, he told the police, was essentially that Dee would calm down and return.
Okay, was that reaction unusual to the rest of her family? Because everyone else seems to be increasingly alarmed, while Dale appears to be saying, essentially, give her time, she'll come back. Like, he doesn't track with the rest of the family.
Right. And that difference in reactions would become impossible for Dee's family to ignore. But before we examine why, we need to understand what had been happening inside Dee and Dale Warner's marriage before she disappeared. But Dee's family wasn't convinced, because this wasn't simply about whether a makeup bag was missing. It wasn't simply about an argument at work. It wasn't simply about a woman needing some time alone. They knew Dee, knew her routines, knew the way she communicated, knew how connected she was to her children, and they knew she had left behind something far more important than a vehicle: her 9-year-old daughter. Sunday became Sunday night. There was still no call, no text, no sighting, no explanation. And somewhere during those first hours of searching, the question began to change. Initially, it was, where did Dee go? Soon, it would become, what happened to Dee Warner? Because unbeknownst to everyone searching for her that Sunday, the last known chapter of Dee Warner's life had already been written. What nobody knew yet was where the truth had been hidden. To understand what happened during those final hours, we must understand what Dee Warner had been trying to change. Because by April of 2021, the life Dee had built with Dale Warner was no longer the life she wanted. Their marriage had become deeply troubled. Years later, Dee's daughter Raquel would describe the relationship under oath as extremely toxic, but relationships rarely arrive at that point overnight. And neither did this one. Dee and Dale had married in 2006. Together, they created a complicated life in which marriage, children, land, farming, equipment, employees, and multiple businesses were interconnected. Separating one from the other was not going to be simple. And separating Dee from Dale wasn't going to be simple either.
Of course not. Not when your marriage and your livelihood are tied together like that. If Dee leaves Dale, this isn't just about deciding who moves out of the house. What happens to the businesses, the property, the money? Those are all the issue, and Dale's looking hinky right now.
Hinky Dale. Now those questions would become central to the prosecution's theory of motive, because Dee wasn't simply talking about leaving. Now, according to testimony and evidence presented at Dale Warner's trial, Dee wanted a divorce, and she wanted the businesses divided or sold. For Dale, that had enormous consequences. But there was much more happening inside their relationship than finances. Dee's children described a marriage marked by jealousy, control, and conflict. Raquel testified that Dale could be controlling toward her mother. There were allegations that he monitored Dee, that he wanted to know where she was, and that at one point, a tracking device had been placed on her vehicle. The people closest to Dee were watching a relationship deteriorate. But there was another piece of their story that would eventually become part of the murder trial. Dee had been unfaithful. And we're going to be precise about this, because Dee deserves precision. At trial, Madison Wolfe, a woman who had worked for Dee as a nanny and personal assistant before becoming a close friend, testified that Dee had been involved in an affair. According to Madison, the relationship lasted approximately 1 year, and it ended in January of 2020, more than a year before Dee disappeared. Madison testified that Dee had stored the man's contact information in her phone under another name.
All right, well, it's good that you're making a clear timeline, because hearing the word affair in a murder case can immediately lead people somewhere that evidence doesn't necessarily take them. That wasn't something investigators established, but was actively happening the weekend Dee disappeared, right?
Correct. And that distinction matters. The affair was part of the history of Dee and Dale's marriage. It was discussed, it was argued about. And prosecutors presented evidence that infidelity remained one of the subjects of conflict between them. And this makes the tracking device even more clear. But it does not change what came later. And it certainly does not change Dee's right to leave a marriage she no longer wanted to be in. By 2021, Dee appeared to have reached that decision. She wanted out, and people around her knew it. This wasn't simply an angry statement made during one argument. Her children knew she was contemplating divorce. People close to her knew the marriage was in serious trouble, and Dee was beginning to think about what came next. Now, there is something else worth understanding about her here. Dee was not a passive person. Friends remembered a woman with some sass. She was tough, energetic. She could run a business, make tough decisions, and she didn't hesitate to speak her mind. And from everything her family said about her, Dee Warner knew how to take up space in her own life. Because sometimes when we tell stories involving troubled marriages, we unconsciously begin rewriting the woman. We make her fragile, quiet, helpless. Dee does not appear to have been any of those things. She was complicated. She had made mistakes. She had strong opinions. She could apparently give you some attitude. And, above all, she was loved.
Okay, so she was a real chick. She doesn't have to have lived a perfect life for what happened to her being wrong.
Victims do not have to pass a purity test. Dee Warner was a human being. And by April of 2021, this particular human being had apparently decided she was finished with her marriage. The tension that was building wasn't confined to the house. There were also serious problems involving the businesses. In the days immediately before Dee disappeared, a dispute involving employees in the trucking operation had escalated. Money was part of the conflict. Business was part of it, and Dee was angry. Then came Friday, April 23rd. A message from an employee appears to have pushed things even further. Prosecutors would later argue that by that weekend, Dee had reached her limit and she was ready to tell Dale the marriage was over. And Dee apparently anticipated that conversation might become ugly. Because Saturday, April 24th, she had made a decision involving her young daughter, and Lena would not be there. A friend picked up the 9-year-old and took her away from the house. According to prosecutors, Dee had arranged it because she planned to speak with Dale about divorce, and she did not want Lena there to witness the argument.
Well, that changes a lot about the way we look at Lena spending the night away. It seems like an ordinary sleepover at first, but Dee may have deliberately made sure that she was somewhere else before confronting Dale. So the night that she's going to confront Dale, she disappears? Come on!
I know.
Hello?
I know. It's really easy to put together. And that's one of those details that becomes much more significant once we understand what was happening behind it. Dee wasn't simply sending her daughter off for the evening. According to the state's evidence, she was creating distance between her child and a confrontation she knew was coming. Then the friend left, and Dee remained at the house with Dale. Now, what happened between them over the next several hours would eventually become one of the most closely examined periods in this entire case. We know there was an argument. Even Dale acknowledged that. And according to court records, Dale told investigators the argument involved money and infidelity. He reportedly described it as the worst argument of his life. Think about where we are now. Dee has told people she wants a divorce. The business and substantial property are intertwined. Their marriage has a history of jealousy and conflict. And she arranged for their young daughter to be away from the home, and now Dee and Dale are left alone.
Does he cop to saying that she wanted a divorce? So do we know definitively whether Dee actually told him that night that she wanted the divorce?
Well, the prosecution's case was that she did. And testimony showed that Dee had been preparing for exactly that conversation. But this is where we must become very careful with language. There were only 2 people inside that marriage who knew every word exchanged that night: Dee and Dale. Dee would never get the opportunity to tell investigators what happened, but Dale would. And over the years, investigators would listen very closely to what he said. They would also compare those statements against phones, vehicles, security cameras, farm equipment, physical evidence, and eventually against something hidden on the property itself. But before investigators could reach any of that, Sunday morning had to happen. The family had to realize Dee was gone, and law enforcement had to decide what kind of disappearance they were looking at. Because during those first crucial hours, there was already a theory being offered about where Dee had gone. She was upset. She had left before. Give her time. She'll cool off, and she'll come home. But Dee's family didn't believe it. And soon, they would begin asking a much more uncomfortable question. If Dee Warner hadn't willingly left that farm, why did it look as though someone wanted everyone to believe she had? By the end of Sunday, April 25th, 2021, Dee Warner had been reported missing. Her family was worried. Dale Warner was not presenting himself as particularly alarmed. And from the very beginning, there was already an explanation being offered. Dee was upset. She left. She'd cool down, she'd come back. But as hours turned into days, that explanation began to create more questions than answers. According to reporting later compiled by 48 Hours, the Lenawee County Sheriff's Office searched for Dee and spoke with Dale multiple times. Dale voluntarily allowed investigators onto his properties on several occasions. No body was found. No obvious scene of violence was identified, and initially, there was nothing investigators could point to and say, this is where Dee Warner was killed.
Without a crime scene, without a body, and without someone saying they witnessed something, what exactly are police investigators to do at that point? A missing person or a possible homicide? Like, where's the evidence to point them in either direction?
That right there was precisely the problem. Because Dee's family was becoming convinced very quickly that this was not a woman who had chosen to disappear. But suspicion, even very strong suspicion, is not evidence. So, the search began. Dee's brother, Greg Hardy, organized roughly 50 people to search the farmland surrounding the Warner property. They walked fields. They looked for anything that might explain where Dee had gone. And they found nothing. Dale appeared during that search on a four-wheeler. According to Greg, he did not meaningfully participate. And Greg began watching him. Not because he had proof, but because something about Dale's behavior bothered him.
Yeah, that's gotta be difficult. It's a difficult line for the family, for sure. Because on one hand, you don't want suspicion to replace evidence. But on the other hand, you know the person who is missing better than almost anyone. That family knows Dee and knows what she would do, what she wouldn't do. So it's gotta be really difficult for the family.
That's right. And Greg's concern kept growing. About 6 weeks after Dee disappeared, Greg confronted Dale. He asked him how he thought the investigation was going. According to Greg's later account, Dale said it was a little slow, but okay. But Greg didn't buy into it, and he told Dale just that. By then, the Hardy family was moving toward a conclusion they would eventually state very publicly. They did not believe Dee had voluntarily left. And they, increasingly, suspected Dale knew what had happened to her. But Dale continued talking to investigators, and over time, his explanations became increasingly difficult to reconcile with the woman Dee's family knew. At one point, according to testimony from the lead detective at Dale's 2026 trial, Dale suggested Dee may have escaped to Florida or near the border, boarded an inexpensive boat, and ended up living in Mexico or Jamaica with a drug cartel. Like, what in the actual? None of that makes any sense.
So where's he getting these ideas from? Were they involved with drug cartels previously? Like, what's happening here? We made a left turn.
We made a sharp left turn. I mean, this is just outrageous. Outrageous. So, yeah, that's one theory. But there was still no verified sighting of Dee. No financial trail showing her building a new life somewhere else. No communication with her children. No message to Lena. No call home. Nothing that demonstrated Dee Warner was alive somewhere, starting over.
Yeah, now it almost gets to the point that this is where you need to start asking the obvious questions. If Dale believed Dee had willingly left, and this is true in his world, what evidence did he have that she has actually gone anywhere?
Wow.
That he's just throwing crazy things that she ran off with a cartel out there? Like, does he have any evidence? Like, this is what happened at the end of our argument, and she did X, Y, Z, and then left? Didn't they still live together?
And that question would haunt this investigation. Because investigators could search the places around them. They could examine vehicles, talk to employees, interview family members. They could return to the properties, but Dee herself remained absent. And when a person disappears from a rural property, there's another enormous problem. There is simply so much ground. We are talking, this is a massive property. Fields, outbuildings, equipment, storage areas, roadways, neighboring land, places where something might be hidden, places where something might be moved. And in a farming operation like the Warners, there were machines capable of moving very heavy things. That fact would matter later, but not yet. For now, the family kept looking. Greg and Dee's supporters organized vigils. They held rallies. They kept Dee's face in the public eye. They demanded answers, and they began pushing for greater involvement from outside investigators. In fact, a private investigator, Billy Little Jr., eventually joined the effort. He walked properties. He spoke with potential witnesses. He used drones to search the area, and he and Greg tried something else as well. Pressure. Public pressure. Psychological pressure. A billboard appeared near the Warner property, and it read, "Help Dale find Dee." That wording, well, that was deliberate. Greg later explained that it was sarcastic. He and Little did not believe Dale was doing enough to find his wife, and they wanted him to know that people were watching.
Well, that was a bold move, but at that point, Dale hadn't been charged with anything, right?
That's right. And I gotta say, I love the billboard. And no, that is important. For a long time, Dale Warner was not a convicted murderer. He was the husband of a missing woman who denied harming her. His attorney would later emphasize that Dale cooperated with law enforcement, allowed searches, and repeatedly denied killing Dee. That is why we must keep two timelines running side by side. What Dee's family believed and what investigators could prove. Those are not always the same thing. Months passed, then a year, and Dee still had not appeared, but her family did not stop. And eventually, the investigation changed hands. Michigan State Police had previously assisted in the case along with the FBI. It was August 2022 when the Michigan State Police formally took over the investigation. And that moment changed everything. Because state investigators did not simply inherit a missing person case. They began rebuilding it. They examined old interviews, old searches, old timelines, phones, vehicle information, witness statements, and the physical landscape of the Warner properties.
So by then, more than a year has passed. Doesn't that make everything harder? Memories fade, land changes, equipment moves, evidence can disappear.
Absolutely, it can. And that lost time would become a significant part of this story. But it also created something else. Perspective. Investigators could now look backward at more than a year of behavior, more than a year without a verified sighting, more than a year without Dee contacting the children she had been deeply connected to, and more than a year of statements from Dale that could now be compared against data. That is when small details begin becoming important. A movement, a vehicle, a machine. Something remembered months later. Something someone saw, but didn't understand at the time. Greg Hardy, Dee's brother, had one of those memories. Shortly after Dee disappeared, he remembered seeing Dale working around an old fertilizer tank. According to later reporting, Greg recalled seeing Dale painting it. Now, at the time, there was nothing about an old farm tank being painted that screamed murder investigation. It was farm equipment. Farmers repair equipment. They paint equipment. They move equipment. There was no reason then to understand what that observation might eventually mean.
Yeah, but if you're rebuilding a case years later, you don't get to dismiss details just because they seemed ordinary when they happened.
Bingo. Because sometimes the most important piece of evidence in a case doesn't look important when someone first sees it. It only becomes important after you know what question to ask. And the Michigan State Police started to ask new questions. They were looking at what Dale said, at what technology said, what witnesses remembered, and slowly a theory began to take shape. Not that Dee Warner had left the farm, but that she had never left it at all. In November of 2023, more than 2.5 years after Dee disappeared, Michigan State Police arrested Dale Warner. He was charged with Dee's murder and tampering with evidence. However, there was one extraordinary problem. Investigators still had not found Dee.
So they were preparing to prosecute a murder without the victim's body.
Yes. And that meant the state had to prove something much larger than simply that Dee was missing. They had to convince a court, and eventually a jury, that Dee Warner was dead, that she had been murdered, and that Dale Warner was the one responsible. And they had to do all of that without being able to show them where she was. At least, not yet. When Michigan State Police arrested Dale Warner in November of 2023, Dee Warner had been missing for more than 2.5 years. There had been no verified sightings, no communication with her children, no confirmed evidence that she had started another life somewhere else, and investigators had still not recovered her body. Yet, Dale was charged with murder. And that creates an obvious question. How do you prove someone has been murdered when you cannot prove where that person is?
Yeah, and I'm guessing the answer cannot simply be she would never leave her family. That may be incredibly persuasive emotionally, but legally, prosecutors need much more than that.
Exactly. A family can know someone's habits. They can know her heart. They can know what she would or would not normally do. But a murder charge requires evidence. So, investigators began building the case piece by piece, not around one dramatic discovery, but around accumulation, phones, financial records, vehicle information, witness statements, search warrants, technology, and contradictions. During Dale Warner's preliminary examination in 2024, Michigan State Police Detective Sergeant Daniel Drewer testified that investigators had executed numerous search warrants involving properties, medical records, bank accounts, and electronic devices. At one point, investigators had collected approximately 100 Apple devices as they worked to reconstruct what happened to Dee.
100 devices? That gives you a little inkling of how complicated this investigation had become.
Sure does. Because Dee and Dale's lives were not contained inside one house. There were multiple businesses, employees, vehicles, properties, phones, computers, farm equipment, and years of digital information. Investigators were trying to recreate a very narrow window of time, using an enormous amount of material. And some of that material began revealing just how closely Dale had monitored Dee. At his eventual trial, jurors heard evidence involving tracking devices and vehicle monitoring associated with Dee. Prosecutors presented this as part of a larger pattern of control within the marriage.
So Dee's family did describe him as controlling, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Investigators eventually found technological evidence that helped put context around those concerns. Another thing that I'm wondering about is what's going on with the businesses for these 2.5 years? Are the kids in control of any of these businesses, or is he just raking in all the money all across the board?
Right, I'm not certain.
There, does something come in where they're proving some of this murder case by his business transactions? I would imagine.
Right. I don't know. I couldn't find any information because I was thinking the same thing too, Christine, because Dee was a powerhouse and she was like the trucking part was mostly hers, but she oversaw all of it. And we are no longer talking about only a family impressions. We are talking about evidence introduced in court. Investigators also examined Dale's phone. And years later, jurors would hear about internet searches recovered from his device. Among them were searches related to chemical cremation, liquid cremation, what could be done with a 1,000-gallon propane tank, and dating sites for widowers. Those searches sound chilling now, but we need to be careful. The search history by itself does not prove murder. People search strange things all the time. People search disturbing things. Context matters. Timing matters. And prosecutors still had to show how any individual search connected to Dee's disappearance.
And I guess those are important distinctions because once you know the ending of a case, it becomes easy to look backward and make every strange detail seem like proof.
Right. And our job is not to turn coincidence into evidence after the fact. Our job is to follow what investigators could establish. And another major area they examined was money. Remember, Dee and Dale did not simply share a marriage. They shared businesses, land, equipment, assets. And according to testimony at the preliminary examination, business finances became a major focus of the prosecution's case. Dee's son, Zach, who kept books for the businesses, testified as investigators tried to understand what a separation or sale of those businesses could have meant financially. The prosecution's theory was becoming more clear. Dee wanted out, and leaving could potentially change far more than Dale's marriage. It could change his business life, his property, his finances, his future.
So prosecutors are now building a motive, but motive still does not tell them how Dee died.
Correct. And it certainly does not tell them where she is, which is why investigators kept returning to movement. Who was where? Which vehicles moved? Which equipment moved? What cameras captured? And what people remembered? One piece of machinery would eventually become especially important: a JCB front-end loader. Later trial testimony and surveillance evidence showed Dale operating that loader during the critical period surrounding Dee's disappearance. Investigators would eventually develop a theory about why that machine mattered. But again, a theory is not the same thing as proof. Now, no blood was found in the loader bucket. No physical evidence established that Dee had been inside of it. That limitation would later become part of the defense case.
And that seems important for us to say because prosecutors may believe that they know how something happened, while forensic testing may not be able to confirm every step of it.
You got that right. This case was increasingly becoming a mosaic. No single tile showed the entire picture, but investigators believed that when enough pieces were placed together, the image became difficult to ignore. Then there was Dale himself. He had been interviewed repeatedly, and investigators compared those statements over time, where he said Dee had been, what he said she had taken, what he believed she had done, and his explanations for why she had vanished. At one point, he suggested she may have left the country and ended up with a drug cartel. But investigators had found no evidence supporting that scenario.
And at some point, doesn't the absence of evidence for Dee being alive become evidence in itself that she's not? Not necessarily evidence of who killed her, but evidence that she did not simply just leave and start over somewhere.
And that was essentially the part of the circumstantial case. If we think about it, years passed. No confirmed contact with any of her children. No authenticated sighting. No financial activity demonstrating a new life. No credible trail leading somewhere else. And this was a woman whose life had been deeply embedded in her family and business. By 2024, Dee's children took another painful step. They petitioned the court to have their mother legally declared dead. And in March of that year, a Lenawee County court granted that request. Now, there is something especially cruel about that moment. For nearly 3 years, Dee's family had fought to find her alive or dead. Now they were asking a judge to legally acknowledge what they had come to believe. Their mother was not coming home.
That must have been devastating. You're still searching for her while simultaneously asking the court to recognize that she is dead. And not that I'm a legal eagle or anything, but I think that is par for the course in order for them to take someone to court for her murder, right?
I do believe you are absolutely right.
Either way, it's heartbreaking to have to do.
Agreed. Trying to stay in the mindset that you'll find your mother, but realizing you're not finding her the way you hoped. And meanwhile, the criminal case against Dale continued. In May and June of 2024, the preliminary examination stretched across multiple days. Witness after witness took the stand. These children, friends, employees, investigators. The court heard about the marriage, the business, the arguments, the digital investigation, the searches, and what law enforcement had and had not found. Then Detective Sergeant Drewer faced a question that went directly to the weakness everyone could see: physical evidence. He acknowledged that investigators did not have physical evidence establishing a murder scene for Dee Warner. No body, no confirmed place of death, no blood evidence proving where she had been killed, and yet, on June 7, 2024, the judge ruled there was sufficient evidence for Dale Warner's murder case to proceed to trial.
So a judge isn't saying that Dale is guilty. He's saying that the state has shown enough evidence that a jury should ultimately hear the case. The legal system is so tangled, in my opinion.
I know. And that is a critical distinction. A preliminary examination does not determine guilt. The question is whether there is enough evidence to establish probable cause and move the prosecution forward. The judge decided there was. And at that moment, Dale Warner was headed toward a murder trial. A murder trial prosecutors were preparing to conduct without Dee Warner. But something was bothering investigators. Something from the farm. Something people had seen. Something that had been there during previous searches, yet had never fully given up its secret. Remember what Greg Hardy had noticed years earlier? Dale working around an old tank, painting it, moving around it. At the time, it had looked like nothing more than farm work. But investigators now had years of information that Greg did not have when he first saw it. They had witness statements, surveillance, search histories, equipment movements, and a growing theory about what could have happened after Dee died. So, in the summer of 2024, Michigan State Police returned to the Warner property. And this time, they were going to look somewhere they never looked before.
Inside the tank, of course. And I don't understand why everywhere that he didn't move around that farm, that somebody saw he moved around that farm, or any of the equipment movements, I don't understand why they didn't turn all of those places inside out. But now you're going to tell me now, after all this time, they finally look inside the tank. That's what you're going to tell me, right? Inside the tank?
Inside the tank. And I agree. Like, you're searching thousands of acres, and yet you have large containers. Come on.
No, everything should have been looked in, under, moved. All of the equipment, the tire tracks of all the equipment around the farm should have been followed. Like, come on, people.
I know.
Seriously.
I know. Bonkers. Now, what they found there would end a search that had lasted more than 3 years and transform the case against Dale Warner forever. In August of 2024, more than 3 years after Dee Warner disappeared, Michigan State Police returned to the property connected to Dale Warner. They were not searching blindly. By then, investigators had spent years reconstructing the movements and statements, machinery, property, and the things people remembered after Dee vanished. And one of those memories belonged to her brother Greg. But years later, the ordinary became suspicious. And on August 16th of 2024, investigators executed another search warrant. The tank was an anhydrous ammonia tank, the kind of equipment that would not look unusual sitting on an agricultural property. It had been taken out of service, and at some point, it had been sealed shut.
Okay, when you say sealed shut, are we talking about a lid that was closed or something more permanent? Like, did he actually solder some metal together?
Yeah, something more permanent. Investigators determined that access to the tank had been welded closed. But before cutting it open, they wanted to know whether there was anything inside. So, investigators had the tank x-rayed, not with an ordinary medical x-ray. This was equipment capable of seeing through heavy steel walls of an agricultural tank. And on that image, they saw something. An object was inside.
So before they ever even opened the tank, they could already see that something was in there.
Yep. And investigators went one step further. They used a camera to look inside. And what they saw confirmed that this was no longer simply an old piece of farm equipment. There appeared to be human remains inside. Only then did investigators move forward with opening the tank. And inside, they found Dee Warner, still in her pajamas. For more than 3 years, Dee's family had searched fields. They had searched property. They held vigils. They put up signs. They called for answers. They pushed investigators. They had asked a court to declare Dee legally dead. And all that time, Dee had never been far away. She had been hidden inside the tank.
I am almost infuriated right now. This is almost impossible to process because this wasn't somewhere hundreds of miles away. This wasn't another state. This was property connected to the life she had lived, connected to something that he had last been seen working on, and it took them 3 years to look in.
It's nuts. And for Dee's family, the discovery brought two realities crashing together. They had finally found her. And finding her confirmed the thing they had spent years hoping somehow wasn't true. Dee was dead. Initially, Michigan State Police announced only that human remains had been discovered. Investigators still had to establish whose remains they were. An autopsy was conducted. Additional testing followed. Then, on August 21st, 2024, authorities confirmed the identification. The remains belonged to Dee Warner. After 3 years, 3 months, and nearly 4 weeks, Dee had been found.
Now, there definitely is relief in family bringing someone home, but I don't even know whether relief is the right word here at all, because I'm not connected to them at all, and I am infuriated right now.
I don't think there is one right word, because finding a missing loved one this way doesn't erase the years of searching. It doesn't undo the wondering, and it doesn't give a family back the person they lost. But it does give them something they have been denied: certainty. Dee had not walked away. She had not abandoned her children. She had not started another life somewhere else. She had been there, hidden. The Jackson County medical examiner determined that Dee's death was a homicide. And later, when the case finally went before a jury in 2026, prosecutors disclosed more about what the examination of Dee's remains had revealed. Evidence presented at trial showed that Dee had suffered blunt force trauma. She had also been strangled. There were additional findings, and we are going to discuss them because they become important evidence at trial. But we do not need to linger over them. Dee's body had been wrapped. Tape had been placed around parts of her face and neck. Prosecutors argued that those actions were part of the effort to ensure she could not survive and to conceal what had been done to her.
And now, investigators finally have something they didn't have when Dale was originally arrested: Dee herself. Of course, that completely changes the case. It makes it a slam dunk.
Right. It changes it profoundly, but maybe not in the way we might expect, because investigators had already charged Dale Warner with murder before Dee was found. They had already constructed a circumstantial case. The discovery didn't create the prosecution from nothing. Instead, it gave investigators an entirely new category of evidence. The medical examiner could now examine injuries. Investigators could examine what Dee had been wrapped in. They could examine the tank itself. They could examine how it had been altered, and suddenly, earlier pieces of the investigation could be reconsidered in light of what they now knew. Remember the machinery, the front loader? Remember Greg seeing work being done around the tank? Remember investigators trying to understand movements around the property? Those details no longer existed in isolation. The prosecution would eventually propose a sequence. They argued that after Dee was killed, her body was moved using the front loader. They further alleged that her body was temporarily placed inside a safe before ultimately being concealed inside the tank. That reconstruction was presented to jurors during Dale Warner's trial. But once again, we need to separate reconstruction from direct proof. Investigators did not find blood in the loader bucket. No eyewitness testified that they saw Dee's body being moved in it. The prosecution argued the totality of the evidence supported its theory. The defense challenged that conclusion.
Which means even after Dee was found, the jury was still going to have to decide how much of the state's reconstruction they believed.
Exactly. Finding Dee answered one enormous question: where was she? It did not automatically answer every question about how she got there. And there was another issue. The tank had been on a property associated with Dale Warner, but ownership alone does not prove who placed someone inside it. The state still needed to connect Dale to the concealment, and prosecutors believed they could. They had his actions, his statements, access to the property, access to equipment, witness observations, digital evidence, the history of the marriage, the timing, and now Dee's body. For more than 3 years, the defense could point to one enormous uncertainty. Maybe Dee was alive. Maybe she had left. Maybe she was somewhere investigators had not found. But on August 21st, 2024, that argument disappeared. Dee Warner was dead. Her death was a homicide, and her remains had been concealed inside a welded-shut agricultural tank.
And I keep coming back to something her family had been saying from the very beginning. She didn't leave them.
She didn't. And that matters, because for years, people who loved Dee had been forced to live beside suggestions that perhaps she had simply walked away, that perhaps she had chosen another life, that perhaps someday she would turn up. Now the physical evidence answered that. She had never been given the opportunity to choose another life. And there was another consequence of finding Dee. For the first time since the investigation began, her family knew where she was. They could bring her home. They could mourn her as a family should be allowed to mourn someone they love, not as a missing person or a photograph on a poster, not as a question hanging over Lenawee County, but as Dee. But finding Dee did something else. It transformed the coming trial, because prosecutors were no longer walking into court asking 12 jurors to believe that a woman nobody could find must be dead. Now they could show them where she had been. They could explain how she died. They could show them the container in which she had been concealed. And they could ask the question that had been waiting since April of 2021. Who put Dee Warner inside that tank?
And let me guess, Dale's still over there saying it wasn't me.
Right. He maintained his innocence. And that meant the state was going to have to prove its case the old-fashioned way. Witness by witness, statement by statement, piece by piece. And when Dale Warner finally went before a jury in February of 2026, the prosecution would offer them a theory of what happened inside that house on Dee's final night. The defense would tell them the state could not prove it, and 12 people would have to decide which version survived the evidence. For the first time in nearly 5 years, Dee Warner's story was headed toward a verdict. On February 12, 2026, nearly 5 years after Dee Warner disappeared, Dale Warner finally sat before a Lenawee County jury. He was charged with open murder and tampering with evidence. And this time, Dee was in the courtroom too. Not physically, but in photographs, in records, messages, testimony, in the evidence recovered from that tank, and in the voices of the people who had refused to let her disappear. The prosecution had one job: prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Dale Warner killed his wife. The defense had one job: show the jury that the state could not.
And after everything that we've talked about, this still wasn't a case where prosecutors could say, here is the eyewitness who saw Dale kill Dee.
Nope. There was no eyewitness to the murder. No video showing Dee being killed, no confession, and prosecutors could not point to one piece of forensic evidence and say, there, that proves Dale Warner committed the murder. Instead, they gave the jury a timeline and asked them to consider everything together. The prosecution argued that by April 24, 2021, Dee was done with the marriage, ready to divorce Dale, ready to make changes involving the businesses they shared. That night, Dee and Dale argued. Dale himself had described it as the worst argument of his life. The subjects included money and infidelity. And sometime after that argument, prosecutors said Dale killed her. The medical evidence established what Dee could no longer tell the jury herself. She suffered blunt force trauma. She was strangled, and tape had been placed across her mouth and nose. During closing arguments, Lenawee County Prosecutor Jackie Wise focused on the choices made during that attack. The state's position was that what happened to Dee wasn't one accidental act followed by panic. There were multiple actions, multiple opportunities to stop, and then an effort to make Dee disappear.
Yeah, that distinction seems especially important when the jury is being asked to decide not only whether Dale killed her, but what kind of murder the evidence supports.
Exactly. Because Dale had been charged with open murder. In Michigan, that allowed the jury to consider different degrees of homicide based on what they believed the evidence proved. The prosecution sought a first-degree murder conviction. The jury would ultimately have another option, second-degree murder. Before they got there, though, they heard weeks of evidence. One of the most striking pieces concerned just how closely Dale had monitored Dee. Testimony showed that between January of 2019 and April of 2021, Dale checked Dee's location through tracking technology more than 2,100 times. More than 2,000 times.
Okay, that is not occasionally checking where someone is. That is repeated monitoring over a period of years, stalking, and most definitely premeditation, my darling.
That's where I'm going.
Yeah.
And prosecutors used it to support what people close to Dee had already described. A relationship marked by jealousy and control. But the state still needed more. So jurors were shown what happened digitally and physically around the time Dee disappeared. They heard evidence about Dee's phone, vehicle data, surveillance footage, movements around the property, and the JCB front end loader Dale operated on the morning Dee vanished. The prosecution believed that machine was used to move Dee's body. But remember, testing never established that Dee had been inside the loader. There was no blood recovered from the bucket linking her to it. The prosecution's theory depended on the totality of the evidence, and the defense would make sure jurors remembered that.
The front loader is made of metal, and bleach would have quickly washed away any blood, but I digress. What is it exactly that a defense attorney should do? Find every place where the state's theory required no inference and ask whether that inference is actually proven?
Exactly. And Dale's attorney had several places to attack. There was no physical evidence establishing that Dee was murdered inside the Warner home. No blood proving that was the crime scene. No eyewitness, no forensic evidence, and no one had seen Dale put her in the tank. Defense attorney Mary Chartier argued that the state's case was built on speculation, assumptions, and innuendo. Her argument was essentially, you may believe Dee was murdered, you may dislike Dale, you may believe he was a terrible husband, but none of those things prove that he killed her. That is reasonable doubt. And it was the question the jury would eventually have to answer. But prosecutors kept adding pieces. There was surveillance footage from the morning Dee disappeared. Dale was seen gathering welding-related supplies. And investigators had recovered an internet search from one of his devices made after Dee vanished, asking how to dispose of a 1,000-gallon propane tank. There were also searches involving chemical or liquid cremation. Jurors heard that as investigators tried to explain why they eventually began examining tanks that appeared to have been altered or re-welded. And one of those tanks was tank number 34. The tank containing Dee.
It's crazy to me that they got to go through so much, because who else did it on the night that she was decidedly telling you that you were out and she was selling everything that had anything to do with you? But I digress. Now, the earlier internet searches have a very different context, because again, searching for something isn't the same as doing it. However, when you put all the puzzle pieces together, did she tie herself up and jump into the tank and then, I don't know, and then he just decided to weld it shut by happenstance? Come on.
I know. And that is exactly why we don't isolate it and declare the case solved. The power of the state's argument came from accumulation. The marriage is collapsing. Dee intends to leave. Dale repeatedly tracks her location. They have an enormous argument. Dee disappears. Her phone stops communicating. Her vehicles stayed behind. There was no credible evidence she begins another life, and Dale is seen with equipment and welding supplies during the critical period. Later, there are searches involving disposal of a large tank. A tank on Warner property has been unusually re-welded, and inside it, investigators eventually found Dee. Not one piece, the picture created by all of them. There was forensic evidence involving the tank as well. Investigators examined fingerprints, paint, welds, the way the tank had been altered. A welding expert testified about the modifications, and jurors did something relatively unusual. They went to see the location themselves on February 25th. The jury was transported to the property. They saw the scene where Dee had been hidden.
Do you think physically standing there matters? Because you hear about this all the time where jurors take field trips like this. And I do think that it gives a different perspective. Because we've spent this whole case describing farms, buildings, equipment, and distances. But the jurors actually get to see how it all fits together. So they can explicitly see the scene for what it is.
Right. An experience.
Yeah.
And I love that they do that with the jurors. I think it gave them context that photographs alone cannot provide. But what weight they gave it, only they could decide. And then came something else. Dale's own words. The jury heard portions of his interviews with law enforcement. They heard the possibilities he offered for Dee's disappearance. They heard investigators challenge inconsistencies, and they heard recorded jail calls. The state argued that Dale's explanations and behavior were part of the circumstantial case against him. The defense argued investigators had become fixated on Dale and interpreted everything through the assumption that he was guilty. That is one of the fundamental tensions in any circumstantial case. Does the evidence point toward one person? Or did investigators decide on one person and then make the evidence fit?
The fact that the original investigators had problems gives the defense somewhere to push on that, I guess.
It did. Jurors heard testimony about tension between law enforcement agencies and shortcomings during the earlier stages of the investigation. The defense challenged how evidence had been collected, what had not been collected, and conclusions investigators reached years afterward, because the prosecution doesn't get to erase mistakes simply because the investigation ultimately produces a suspect. The jury had to consider those weaknesses as well. After nearly 3 weeks of testimony, the prosecution rested. Then the defense began its case, and Dale Warner made one of the most consequential decisions any criminal defendant can make. He would not testify. He personally told the judge that was his decision. And we need to be very clear about something here. A defendant has an absolute constitutional right not to testify. The jury cannot treat that decision as evidence of guilt. Dale did not have to prove his innocence. That burden belonged entirely to the prosecution.
So after all those years of hearing Dale's explanations through interviews and recordings and all of his tales about drug cartels, the jury would not hear him answer questions directly from the witness stand.
Correct. The defense called only a handful of witnesses, and then both sides were finished. On March 5th, 2026, the attorneys delivered their closing arguments. The prosecution asked jurors to look at the entire chain. Not one search, not one camera, one witness, one fingerprint, everything. The defense asked them to look at the holes. No eyewitness, no confession, no physical evidence directly proving Dale committed the killing, no forensic confirmation of every step in the prosecution's reconstruction. If those gaps created reasonable doubt, their duty was to acquit him, and then the courtroom could do nothing more. The case belonged to 12 people. The jury began deliberating, and hours passed. They did not reach a verdict that first day. Then another court day passed without an answer. A weekend intervened. And on Tuesday, March 10th, 2026, the jury returned. Nearly 5 years after Raquel drove to her mother's house expecting Sunday breakfast, everyone stood. The verdict was read. On the charge of murder, the jury did not convict Dale Warner of first-degree murder. Instead, they found him guilty of second-degree murder and, on the second charge, tampering with evidence, guilty. Dale Warner had murdered Dee Warner. That was no longer an allegation. It was the verdict of the jury.
I imagine that had to be incredibly complicated emotions for Dee's family because they finally got the guilty verdict they fought years for, but not first-degree murder. And I'm hella surprised right now because how is everything not looking like it was planned? I mean, he damn near got away with it. It was so carefully planned. How was not premeditated and completely intentional? And I understand maybe they debated on the fact that it was in the heat of the moment, a crime of passion, which is what would make it second degree, I guess, reactive kind of homicide. There was so much planning involved in this. Like, he almost got away with it. He planned it so well. Maybe we should do like a little PSA. Whenever you feel like you're going to have a heated conversation with somebody, maybe more witnesses is the better of the options than less.
That's right. Yeah. You know, this dude's already, a full-on control freak.
She seems like she was a control freak as well. So
right.
I can kind of relate to her, like, I got this mofo, right? I get that. But at the same time, maybe she didn't, because he obviously won. So... Mm-hmm. I don't know, like, woulda, coulda, shoulda,
right?
Monday quarterback and all over the place. But the fact that this guy got second degree and not first degree, I'm livid for the family. So,
right, agreed.
There's that.
Agreed. And her brother Greg Hardy acknowledged that disappointment as well. He had wanted first degree murder, but standing outside the courthouse, he also described what had just happened as something much bigger. After years of searching, years of fighting, years of refusing to accept that his sister simply walked away, a jury had believed them. Dee did not leave. She did not abandon her children. She did not vanish into Mexico or Jamaica or another life. She was murdered. And Dale Warner was responsible.
Yeah, absolutely. It's striking. I mean, for years, the family had to prove Dee wouldn't leave. Then investigators had to prove Dee was dead. Then prosecutors had to prove she was murdered. Then they had to prove who did it. It feels like her family had to fight for every single piece of this truth.
And they did. And maybe that is why the words they had displayed across Lenawee County for years mattered so much. Justice for Dee. Those words were on signs and banners, at rallies. They became a promise. And on March 10th, 2026, that promise finally had a verdict attached to it. But there was still one courtroom left. One opportunity for Dee's children, her brother, and the people who had carried her name for nearly 5 years to speak directly about what Dale Warner had taken from them. Because before a judge decided how much of the rest of his life Dale would spend behind bars, the courtroom was going to hear about the life that mattered more, Dee's. And that's where we're going to end this story. Not with the man who tried to make Dee Warner disappear, with the people who made certain he failed. On May 7th, 2026, For the final time in this criminal case, Dee Warner's family walked into the Lenawee County courtroom. But this time, they weren't there to search for her. They weren't there to convince anyone she hadn't simply walked away. They weren't there waiting to hear whether there was enough evidence for a trial. And they weren't waiting for a jury to decide whether Dale Warner had murdered her. Those questions had finally been answered. Now, it was their turn to speak. 5 members of Dee's family gave victim impact statements. Her sister-in-law, Shelley Hardy, her daughter, Raquel Bach, her son, TJ Bach, her nephew, Parker Hardy, and her brother, Greg Hardy. One by one, they told the court what Dee's murder had actually cost. Not in the businesses, the acreage, the equipment, the money, in people. A daughter without her mother, children without their grandmother, a brother without a sister, a family divided into 2 periods of time, before Dee disappeared and after.
And I'm also wondering, the youngest daughter, was she living with Dale for the 3 years that all of this was going on?
I don't know that either, and that makes your stomach churn.
Yeah. I'm hoping that the family fought hard enough and that she was living with her sisters or something, because how emotionally devastating is that to have been, indoctrinated with the fact that your mother took off on you by your father, right? Because that's what he was saying to the public. Right. I would imagine he was saying to his daughter that she just took off, she'll be back, or she just took off and built a new life without you. I mean, the therapy that this kid is likely to have to go through. Mm-hmm. My heart is breaking for this child.
That's horrible. God only knows what he said to this little girl. And then the realization, if she was home, because I don't know that. So I'm going to be clear. I don't know if she was staying with him. I would imagine so. It's her father.
Yeah, right?
Right? So then the realization that you're on that house, you're on that property, and to know that your mother was in that tank on that property. It's disgusting.
Unfathomable.
Yeah.
That's the point. And my heart is broken for this little girl and for the future, for an unbeknownst amount of years while she deals with all of this. Mm-hmm. Her mother's gone. She lived with her mother in a tank a couple of yards from her. Do you know what I'm saying? If she lived in the house, like, my brain is just running in circles thinking about all of this traumatic truth that now is bestowed on her after all of this is said and done. And I get the brother, the sister-in-law, the older children. I get that they're equally damaged, but there's a whole nother level to it when the damage and the trauma of this magnitude happens at that young of an age. My God, my brain is exploding because of it. Mm-hmm. But back to what we were saying, there's nothing a judge can say that's going to make any of this better in any way.
No, there isn't. Prison cannot return Sunday breakfasts. It cannot restore missed birthdays or holidays or phone calls. It cannot give Lena back the years she should have had with her mother. And it cannot return to Dee's older children the woman they had once called whenever they needed her. Raquel described her mother as the foundation of their family, their protector, supporter, motivator, their best friend. She spoke about a family still trying to learn how to live without her. Think about that phrase, learning how to live without someone. Because grief cannot end when a jury says guilty. Sometimes that is simply when another part of it begins.
Especially after nearly 5 years of fighting. They weren't allowed to just grieve Dee. They had to search for her, advocate for her, push the investigation forward, then sit through a murder trial. And then the outcome of that murder trial, which was not, I imagine, not exactly what they wanted. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. Now, for years, Dee's family had jobs they never asked for. Search coordinator, advocate, investigator, media spokesperson, court observer. They had to keep repeating her name because they were terrified that if they stopped, the world might stop looking. Greg Hardy carried an enormous part of that fight. And even before sentencing, he talked about wanting something positive to come from everything his family had endured. If their experience could expose problems, if it could help another family, if something could change because of what happened to Dee, then perhaps their fight could reach beyond their own loss. But first, there had to be accountability. Before Judge Michael O'Saver imposed sentence, Dale was given the opportunity to address the court. Surprise, surprise, he didn't speak. His attorney told the judge that Dale continued to maintain his innocence and denied killing Dee. Then Judge O'Saver addressed the case. He spoke about the extraordinary suffering Dee's family had endured, and he noticed something particularly important. For years after Dee disappeared, Dale knew what had happened to her. He knew where she was, and at any point, he could have ended at least one part of her family's suffering, but he chose not to. Then came the sentence for the second-degree murder of Dee Warner. Dale Warner was sentenced to 375 months to 60 years in prison, 31 years and 3 months, before even reaching the maximum end of the sentence. For tampering with evidence, he received an additional 17 months to 10 years, and Judge O'Saver ordered the sentences to run consecutively, one after the other. Dale was given credit for time he had already served, but even with that credit, he would not become eligible for parole for decades.
So for Dee's family, this was really the end of the criminal trial process.
Sure was. Now, there may be appeals. There are other legal matters that can continue, but the question that consumed this family for almost 5 years had finally reached an answer inside a criminal courtroom. Dale Warner was convicted of murdering Dee, and he was sentenced for it. But Christine, I don't think that's where Dee Warner's story ends. Because if we end this episode with Dale Warner, we make the same mistake that happens far too often in true crime. We allow the person who caused the devastation to become more memorable than the person whose life was taken. And Dee Warner was memorable long before anyone knew her name because she was missing. She was a mother, a grandmother, a sister, a friend, a businesswoman, a sixth-generation Michigan farmer. She was hardworking, outgoing, strong-minded, and according to the people who knew her, she had some sass, and good for her. Dee wasn't perfect. She had made mistakes. She had lived a complicated life. She had been unfaithful during her marriage. She had arguments, had opinions. She could apparently let you know exactly what she thought. And none of those things diminish her. They make her human.
And life's, you know what I'm saying? Nobody's perfect. So being imperfect in any way never made her deserving of what happened to her.
Never. Never. And that is something we're saying clearly. A woman does not have to be perfect before she is allowed to leave a relationship. She does not have to be perfect before she deserves safety. She does not have to be perfect for her children to deserve their mother. And she certainly does not have to be perfect for her life to matter. Dee had decided she wanted something different. Whatever that future might have looked like, she was entitled to reach it. She never got the chance. But something else happened that Dale Warner apparently did not anticipate. He concealed Dee. He offered explanations for her absence. Time passed. 1 year, then 2, then 3. But Dee didn't disappear because her family would not allow it. Her photograph appeared across Lenawee County. People searched, they rallied, they put signs in their yards. They showed up at court hearings, asked questions, pushed, demanded, and over again they used 3 words: justice for Dee. After Dale was convicted, Greg Hardy suggested those words could finally change. Maybe it wasn't only justice for Dee. Maybe now it could be victory for Dee. And I think he was right, because Dale Warner succeeded at taking Dee's life, but he failed at erasing it. He could not erase her from her children. He could not erase her from Greg. He could not erase her from the people who loved her. And he certainly could not erase her from Michigan.
Nearly 5 years later, people were still saying her name.
And we're still saying it now. Dee Warner, 52 years old, mother, grandmother, sister, friend, farmer, businesswoman. A woman with a big personality and apparently enough sass to make sure you knew when she entered the room. That is who existed before April 25th, 2021. That is who her family fought for. And that is who deserves to be remembered after the courtroom empties. Her story began for us with a daughter arriving for Sunday breakfast and wondering why her mother wasn't there. For years, Raquel and the rest of Dee's family were forced to live with that unanswered question. Where is Mom? Today, they know. They found her. They brought her home. They told the world what happened to her, and they held the person responsible accountable. But perhaps the greatest victory is simpler than any verdict. Dale Warner tried to make Dee disappear. Her family made certain she never would. For Dee Warner and for every family standing beside an empty chair, waiting for someone they love to come home, we remember. I'm Tracy Preston.
And I'm Christine Mulligan.
And this is Malice in the Mitten,
where the story matters,
but the truth matters more. So thank you, everyone, as always, for coming back and listening. And if we have some new listeners out there, thank you so much for finding our show. Please like, share, and subscribe. Leave us a positive comment.
Yeah, smash all those buttons, hit all those stars, and follow and subscribe everywhere and anywhere you listen to our podcast.
And tell everybody you know. So thanks, everyone. Have a great week. And we will see you back on Wednesday for Round Robin. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.